On June 18th, 1812, the United States Senate delivered one of the most consequential votes in early American history. By a narrow margin of 19 to 13, the young republic declared war against Great Britain. This moment officially marked the beginning of the War of 1812, a conflict shaped by a complex web of maritime disputes, frontier tensions, and questions of national honor. Though often overshadowed by the Revolutionary War before it and the Civil War after, the War of 1812 profoundly influenced America's political, military, and diplomatic trajectory. Today, we explore the circumstances leading to this pivotal vote, the challenges faced during the war, and its lasting legacy on the American nation. The decision to declare war in 1812 was far from sudden. It was the culmination of years of mounting tensions between the United States and Great Britain. At the time, Europe was engulfed in the Napoleonic Wars, with Britain and France locked in a bitter struggle for dominance. Caught in the crossfire was the United States, a neutral nation seeking to maintain its trade and sovereignty. Yet British naval practices increasingly infringed upon American rights, most notably through impressment, the forcible seizure of American sailors, who were conscripted into the Royal Navy. Britain justified this by claiming many of these sailors were deserters from its own fleet, but to Americans, it was a blatant violation of sovereignty and individual liberty. This practice enraged the American public and government alike. It was compounded by British trade restrictions known as the Orders in Council, issued in 1807. These policies effectively blockaded French-controlled European ports, severely limiting American commerce and challenging the principle of free navigation on the seas. Simultaneously, tensions simmered on the American frontier. British agents and soldiers stationed in Canada were accused of inciting Native American tribes to resist U.S. expansion into the Northwest Territory. These conflicts endangered frontier settlers and fueled perceptions that Britain was interfering directly in American affairs. By 1812, this combination of maritime grievances and frontier hostility had created a volatile environment demanding a decisive response. President James Madison recognized the urgency of the moment. In early June 1812, he submitted a formal message to Congress outlining the case against Britain, portraying British actions as existential threats to American independence and national honor. The Senate's subsequent vote was deeply divided. The tally of 19 to 13 highlighted sharp regional, political, and ideological differences within the young nation. The Federalists, particularly strong in New England, opposed war out of concern for disrupted trade and the nation's military unpreparedness. Conversely, Democratic Republicans, especially the war hawks from the South and West, championed conflict as necessary to protect American rights and assert sovereignty. Among these war hawks were figures like Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun, who saw war not only as a means to end British interference, but also as an opportunity to expand American territory, potentially by annexing Canada. The debates were intense and protracted, as senators weighed the risks against the imperatives of national honor and security. Ultimately, the vote in favor of war marked a decisive shift in U.S. foreign policy, from diplomatic protest to armed confrontation. With the declaration signed on June 19, 1812, the United States entered a complex and multi-front conflict. The war unfolded along the Canadian border, the Great Lakes, the Atlantic coast, and the Gulf of Mexico. Yet from the start, America faced serious military challenges: a small standing army, limited naval power, and logistical hurdles. One early American strategy was the invasion of Canada, designed to cut off British support to Native American allies. However, this campaign was marred by poor coordination and failed assaults, such as the repulse at Queenston Heights and the surrender of Detroit. At sea, the young U.S. Navy achieved notable victories. Ships like the USS Constitution, famously nicknamed Old Ironsides, won key single-ship engagements, boosting American morale and demonstrating that the United States could contest British naval supremacy, albeit on a limited scale. On the frontier, violence persisted. The death of the Shawnee leader Tecumseh in 1813 severely weakened Native American resistance in the British-Native alliance, but frontier warfare remained fierce and complex. By 1814, the tide began to turn. With Napoleon's defeat in Europe, Britain redirected significant military resources to North America. British forces launched intensified campaigns, including the burning of Washington, D.C. in August 1814, a symbolic blow to American pride. Yet the American spirit endured. The defense of Baltimore that same month inspired Francis Scott Key to write the poem that would become the Star-Spangled Banner, a lasting emblem of resilience. Peace negotiations commenced in Ghent, Belgium, in late 1814. The resulting Treaty of Ghent, signed on December 24th, restored the pre-war status quo with no territorial changes and left contentious issues like impressment unaddressed. However, by then, the end of the Napoleonic Wars had rendered many maritime disputes moot. Fighting continued into early 1815, with the Battle of New Orleans in January serving as a decisive and symbolic American victory, further galvanizing national pride. Though sometimes called America's forgotten war, the War of 1812 had lasting and profound effects. It solidified the United States' independence and sovereignty in the eyes of the world and its own citizens. Standing up to the British Empire instilled a newfound confidence and nurtured a stronger American nationalism. The war exposed critical military weaknesses, leading to reforms that professionalized the Army and Navy and laid the groundwork for future defense policy. Native American resistance in the Northwest and Southeast was broken, accelerating American expansion into indigenous lands, a tragic but pivotal shift in frontier history. President Madison, initially criticized for the nation's unpreparedness, emerged as a steady leader who guided America through a perilous crisis, enhancing his political legacy. Ultimately, the War of 1812 was a crucible, a test of the young republic's resolve, unity, and place on the world stage. It was a war of ambiguous military outcomes but decisive in shaping the identity and future direction of the United States. On June 18, 1812, the Senate's narrow vote propelled the United States into a defining chapter of its history. That act of political will, driven by principle, outrage, and an unwavering commitment to national dignity, marked a step forward in America's complex journey toward becoming a confident and sovereign nation. The War of 1812 may be overshadowed by other conflicts, but its legacy endures, reminding us that the assertion of independence and national identity is often forged through trials and challenges. Thank you for joining this exploration of a war that helped shape the American Republic. Please subscribe and stay tuned for more deep dives into the pivotal moments that have defined our shared history.